I'm Aisha, 38 years old, and a mother to my incredible son, Marcus, who's in the 4th grade. We live in a quiet university town in the Midwest, a place that prides itself on its progressive ideals and intellectual community. On the surface, it seems welcoming, but beneath that veneer, social and economic lines are drawn with surprising clarity. My days are a constant juggle of part-time jobs, from cleaning offices early in the morning to working at a local diner in the evenings. Every penny counts, and I stretch each dollar as far as it can go to ensure Marcus has everything he needs, and more importantly, everything he deserves. It's a life of hard work, but it's ours. Marcus's school, Northwood Elementary, is one of the best in the district, largely funded by the affluent families who send their children there. The buildings are modern, the resources plentiful, and the parent community is very active, often hosting lavish fundraisers and events. I appreciate the quality education Marcus receives, but I often feel like an outsider looking in. When I drop Marcus off, or pick him up, I see the other parents, impeccably dressed, driving expensive cars, chatting easily amongst themselves. Their conversations often revolve around luxury vacations, private tutors, or weekend getaways to their lake houses. I smile, I nod, but I rarely feel seen or truly acknowledged. It's a strange kind of invisibility, not outright hostility, but a subtle dismissal that whispers, "You don't quite belong here." My clothes are practical, my car is old, and my concerns are often about making rent, not booking a flight to Europe. I am a Black woman in a predominantly white, affluent space, and that reality adds another layer to the unspoken divide. I've learned to navigate these spaces, to hold my head high, and to focus on Marcus. His joy, his curiosity, his bright mind, those are my anchors. But the feeling of being judged, of being categorized before I even open my mouth, it never truly goes away. It's a quiet hum beneath the surface of every interaction. Sometimes, I wonder if the other parents even register my presence beyond a fleeting glance. Am I just the other mom, the one who hurries in and out, the one whose name they might not remember? It's a disheartening thought, but one I've grown accustomed to. This town values success, and success here is often measured by wealth and status. My hard work, my dedication to my son, my resilience, these aren't the metrics they seem to understand or appreciate. I am a working-class parent in a school built on upper-class foundations. Despite these feelings, I refuse to let them deter me. Marcus deserves a parent who is involved, who advocates for him, and who shows up. My presence at the school, even if it feels like walking into a different world, is a non-negotiable part of my commitment to him. I often remind myself that my worth isn't determined by their perceptions or by the size of my bank account. My value lies in my character, my love, and my unwavering dedication to my family. Still, it's human to want to be seen, to be respected. The school sends out notices for various events, and I try to attend the ones that directly impact Marcus. Parent-teacher conferences, school plays, anything that allows me to connect with his teachers and celebrate his achievements. These moments are precious to me. Recently, a notice arrived for the annual Parent-Teacher Association meeting, an important gathering to discuss the school's budget and new initiatives for the upcoming year. I usually avoid these larger, more formal events, knowing the dynamics involved. They feel less about collaboration and more about consensus among the established elite. But this year felt different. Marcus had mentioned some concerns about the art program, which he loves, and I knew budget cuts were on the table. My heart told me I needed to be there, not just for Marcus, but for all the children whose voices might be overlooked. The thought of walking into that room, filled with parents who likely saw me as an anomaly, was daunting. I imagined the polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes, the subtle shifts in body language, the unspoken assumptions. It was a familiar script, one I knew well. Yet, a quiet determination began to simmer within me. This wasn't just about my discomfort, it was about ensuring that every child had access to the resources they needed to thrive. My perspective, born of different circumstances, might be precisely what was missing from their discussions. The crisp white flyer for the PTA meeting sat on my kitchen counter, a stark contrast to the bills and grocery lists surrounding it. It announced the agenda, Northwood Elementary budget review and new initiatives for 2025 to 2026. The bold lettering felt almost accusatory, demanding attention I wasn't sure I had to give. My first instinct was to toss it in the recycling bin. These meetings were always dominated by the same few voices, the ones with the loudest opinions and the deepest pockets. I pictured the polished conference room, the rows of parents in designer clothes, their confident chatter filling the air. I just didn't fit that picture. I knew my presence wouldn't change their minds about anything substantial, or so I thought. They had their priorities, their established ways of doing things, and my input, from my vantage point, often felt irrelevant to their grand schemes. What could I, working multiple part-time jobs, possibly contribute to their high-level financial discussions? The last time I attended a school event, a meet and greet for new parents, I spent most of the evening standing awkwardly by the punch bowl. Conversations flowed around me, but rarely to me. When I did manage to speak, my words seemed to dissipate into the air, unheard or quickly dismissed. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible form of exclusion. No one was overtly rude, but the message was clear: you are not one of us. It's a feeling that, over time, can erode your confidence and make you question your own right to be in certain spaces. But then I thought of Marcus. He had come home last week, excitedly showing me a drawing he made in art class, a vibrant cityscape full of intricate details. He talked about how much he loved the class, how it was his favorite part of the day. And I remembered his worried frown when he mentioned that Mrs. Davis, the art teacher, seemed sad. She said something about needing to be creative with materials next year, Mom, he'd said, his young voice tinged with concern. Does that mean we won't have new paints? That memory solidified my resolve. This wasn't about me and my discomfort. It was about Marcus and his passion. It was about ensuring that the school, which boasted about its holistic education, didn't quietly cut corners on the very programs that nurtured creativity and joy. The flyer also mentioned a new initiative to upgrade the school's technology. While I understood the importance of technology, I also knew that sometimes these upgrades came at the expense of other, equally vital, programs that benefited all students, not just those with access to computers at home. My experiences, my understanding of making do with less, of finding creative solutions to financial constraints, might actually be valuable. I saw the world through a different lens, one that understood the impact of every dollar, every decision on families like ours. The university town had a diverse population, but the school's parent body didn't always reflect that diversity, especially in its most active circles. It was easy for those in power to make decisions that, while well-intentioned, didn't consider the full spectrum of the community's needs. I took a deep breath, picked up the flyer, and marked the date on my calendar. Tuesday evening. It meant I'd have to rearrange my evening cleaning shift, but it was a sacrifice I was willing to make. Marcus's future, and the future of other children, depended on it. A small flicker of hope ignited within me. Perhaps this time, it would be different. Perhaps this time, my voice, however quiet, would find an ear. Or perhaps, I thought with a wry smile, I would simply be a silent observer, gathering information. Either way, I would be there. Not as a trophy wife, not as a socialite, but as Aisha, Marcus's mom, a parent who cared deeply about her child's education and the well-being of the entire school community. My presence was my statement. I ironed my best blouse, a simple but clean white one, and laid out my dark trousers. I wanted to look presentable, professional, but without trying to be something I wasn't. Authenticity, I reminded myself, was my strength. The school auditorium, usually a vibrant space for student performances, felt different that Tuesday evening. Rows of folding chairs were neatly arranged, facing a small stage with a projector screen. The air hummed with low conversations and the clinking of coffee cups. I arrived a few minutes early, hoping to slip in unnoticed and find a seat towards the back. But even then, the room was already filling up. Most of the parents were already there, clustered in small groups, laughing and catching up as if it were a social gathering. As I walked through the double doors, a few heads turned, then quickly turned away. It wasn't an overtly hostile stare, but a fleeting glance, a quick assessment, and then a return to their conversations. It was the familiar feeling of being acknowledged just enough to be dismissed. I saw Mrs. Henderson, whose daughter was in Marcus's class, chatting animatedly with another mom. She caught my eye, offered a quick, tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and then immediately turned back to her friend. It was a polite brush-off, a silent confirmation of my outsider status. The room was predominantly white, with a smattering of other ethnicities, but I was one of the very few black parents present. The unspoken hierarchy of the school community was palpable, a silent agreement on who held influence and who was merely a spectator. I found an empty chair near the aisle, a few rows from the back, and settled in. I pulled out a small notebook and pen, hoping to appear busy and less approachable. It was a defense mechanism, a way to shield myself from the subtle slights and the feeling of being invisible. The conversations continued around me, snippets of discussions about summer plans, private school applications for older children, and the latest renovations to their homes. It was a world so far removed from my daily reality that it felt like listening to a foreign language. No one approached me, no one offered a friendly greeting or asked how my evening was going. I was simply a quiet presence, a shadow in the periphery of their well-established social circles. It reinforced the low-income black parent label that I felt was silently stamped on my forehead. I watched as Mr. Davies, the PTA president, a tall man with a booming voice and an expensive suit, moved through the room, shaking hands, patting backs, and exchanging hearty laughs. He seemed to know everyone, and everyone seemed eager to greet him. He glanced my way once, a fleeting, impersonal nod, before moving on to a group of parents near the front. It was a stark reminder of the social chasm that existed, even in a place supposedly dedicated to the equal education of all children. A wave of discouragement washed over me. Why was I even here? What difference could I possibly make in this environment? My voice, if I chose to use it, would likely be drowned out, or worse, met with polite condescension. But then I looked at the stage, at the Northwood Elementary banner hanging above it, and I thought of Marcus again. His bright smile, his unwavering belief in the fairness of the world. I couldn't let my discomfort overshadow his needs. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and focused my attention on the front of the room. The meeting was about to begin. I might be ignored, but I would listen. I would observe, and I would be ready if the moment called for it. My presence, even if silent, was a form of resistance, a quiet assertion that I belonged, that my child belonged, and that our perspectives mattered, even if they weren't immediately recognized by the dominant group in the room. Mr. Davies called the meeting to order, his voice echoing slightly in the auditorium. He began with a cheerful welcome, thanking everyone for their attendance, especially those who make such a significant contribution to our school community. The emphasis on significant contribution felt like a subtle jab, a reminder of who truly held sway. The presentation began with a detailed breakdown of the school's current budget, projected expenditures, and the inevitable shortfall that always seemed to necessitate difficult decisions. Slides flashed across the screen, filled with charts and figures, most of which seemed designed to impress rather than inform. They spoke of rising operational costs, the need for new athletic equipment, and the desire to expand the gifted and talented program. These were all valid concerns, but I noticed a distinct lack of discussion about the programs that benefited every child, regardless of their academic or athletic inclination. When the discussion shifted to proposed cuts, my ears perked up. The first item mentioned was a reduction in funding for non-essential enrichment programs, specifically singling out the art and music departments. They argued that these could be supplemented by parent-funded after-school clubs. My heart sank. Non-essential. That word grated on me. For children like Marcus, and many others, art and music weren't luxuries. They were vital outlets for expression, creativity, and emotional development. For some, they were the very reasons they loved coming to school. I also noticed that the proposed technology upgrade, a significant capital expenditure, remained untouched. It was framed as an absolute necessity for preparing students for the future, a modernization that couldn't be compromised. Yet, I wondered how many families truly benefited from these high-tech tools if they didn't have access to them at home. The discussion quickly became a debate among a few vocal parents at the front, all agreeing on the necessity of cutting art and music to save for technology. They spoke of priorities and return on investment, using business jargon that felt out of place in a discussion about children's education. One parent suggested that art supplies could be donated by families, implying that the burden should fall on individuals rather than the school budget. It was a well-meaning suggestion, perhaps, but it highlighted a fundamental misunderstanding of the financial realities faced by many families. I scribbled notes furiously in my small notebook, jotting down figures, questions, and observations. I noticed that the proposed technology budget included funds for new interactive whiteboards for every classroom, a costly item that might not be as impactful as they claimed. My mind raced, connecting the dots. If art and music were cut, it would disproportionately affect children whose families couldn't afford private lessons or expensive after-school programs. It would widen the gap between the haves and have-nots, right within the school walls. I thought about the joy in Marcus's eyes when he talked about his art projects. I thought about the quiet children who found their voice through a paintbrush or a musical instrument. These programs were a lifeline for many, not just an optional extra. The parents at the front seemed oblivious to these nuances. They spoke from a place of privilege, where supplementing school programs with private funds was a given, not a challenge. Their solutions often created more barriers for families like mine. A question formed in my mind, a simple one, but one that seemed to be overlooked in their high-level discussions. Who truly benefits from these decisions, and who is left behind? It was a question born from my own lived experience. I looked around the room, at the other parents, many of whom seemed to be nodding along, accepting the proposed cuts as inevitable. Had they considered the full implications, or were they simply trusting the experts on the stage? I knew I had a different perspective, one rooted in practical reality, and a deep understanding of resourcefulness. My experience with stretching every dollar, with making something out of nothing, gave me an insight they lacked. The time for public comments was approaching. My heart began to pound. Could I speak up? Would they listen? Or would my voice simply be another whisper in a room full of shouts, quickly forgotten? The weight of expectation and the fear of dismissal pressed down on me. Mr. Davies finally opened the floor for questions and comments. A few hands shot up immediately, mostly from the same parents who had been dominating the earlier discussions. They offered minor tweaks or expressed support for the proposed cuts, reinforcing the prevailing narrative. I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. My hand hovered uncertainly, half raised, then dropped. What if I stumbled over my words? What if they dismissed me with a polite but firm wave? Or worse, with a patronizing smile? The fear of public humiliation was strong. But then I saw Marcus's face in my mind, his disappointment if his art class was diminished. I thought of other children, perhaps quieter ones, who might not have a voice, whose parents might not feel empowered to speak up. I realized I wasn't just speaking for myself. My hand went up again, this time with more conviction. Mr. Davies, scanning the room, seemed to hesitate for a moment when he saw me, then, almost reluctantly, pointed in my direction. "Yes, ma'am, in the back," he said, his tone lacking the warmth he'd shown others. My palms were sweating, and my voice felt a little shaky as I stood up. All eyes in the room seemed to turn towards me, a mix of curiosity and mild surprise. I could feel the weight of their gaze, the unspoken questions about why I, of all people, was speaking. "My name is Aisha," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Marcus Grant's mother in the 4th grade." I paused, taking a deep breath, and then continued, focusing on the points I had carefully considered. "I understand the need for budget adjustments," I said, "and the importance of technology. However, I have concerns about the proposed cuts to the art and music programs. For many children, these aren't just enrichment activities, they are fundamental to their development." I continued, "Not every family can afford private art lessons or music classes. For those children, school is their only access to these vital forms of expression. Cutting these programs risks creating a wider divide where only children from affluent backgrounds can fully explore their creative talents." I then shifted to the technology budget. While new whiteboards are impressive, I wonder if a portion of that budget could be reallocated. Perhaps investing in more accessible, lower-cost technology that every student can use, like refurbished laptops for a school lending program, would be more equitable. I spoke about resourcefulness, about how small, consistent investments in core programs could have a greater impact than large, flashy ones. I highlighted how quality art supplies, even if not top of the line, could still foster creativity if the program itself was protected. "My son, Marcus, loves art," I said, my voice gaining strength. "And I know many other children do too. Their creativity shouldn't be seen as non-essential or something that only privileged families can afford to cultivate. It's a part of a well-rounded education for all. I finished by suggesting that the PTA consider a more balanced approach, one that prioritized equity and access for every student, not just those whose families could supplement what the school provided. I sat down, my heart still pounding, but a sense of quiet accomplishment settling over me. The room was silent for a moment, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Some parents exchanged surprised glances. Mr. Davies looked momentarily flustered, clearly not expecting such a direct and well-reasoned challenge from the back of the room. It was a small act, a few minutes of speaking, but it felt monumental. I had found my voice, not just for myself, but for the countless others who felt unseen, unheard, and underestimated in spaces like this. The silence was broken by a quiet murmur, then a few nods. The silence in the auditorium, after my comments, felt heavy, then slowly began to dissipate into a low hum of whispers. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, seemingly caught off guard. He fumbled with his notes for a moment before responding, his usual confident demeanor slightly shaken. "Thank you, Aisha," he said, using my name, which felt like a small victory in itself. "Those are interesting points. We will certainly take them into consideration." His tone was still a bit dismissive, but there was a flicker of something new in his eyes, perhaps surprise, or even grudging respect. But the real impact wasn't in his immediate response. It was in the reactions of the other parents. I saw a few heads turn fully towards me, their expressions shifting from polite indifference to genuine thought. Some began to whisper to their neighbors, pointing subtly in my direction. A woman in the front row, who had been nodding vigorously at the proposed cuts, now sat with a thoughtful frown, her gaze fixed on the projector screen, as if re-evaluating the figures. My words had clearly resonated with someone beyond the immediate PTA leadership. After Mr. Davies moved on to the next agenda item, a few parents in my vicinity turned to me. One woman, Miss Chun, whose daughter was also in Marcus's class, leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for saying that, Aisha. I hadn't thought about it that way, about the art program." Her acknowledgement was a small but significant crack in the wall of invisibility. It was the first time a parent, other than Marcus's teachers, had initiated a conversation with me in a public school setting that wasn't about a lost lunchbox or a forgotten permission slip. Throughout the rest of the meeting, I noticed more subtle shifts. When the discussion returned to the technology budget, one parent tentatively raised a question about the equitable distribution of resources, echoing a phrase I had used. It was clear my words had planted a seed. By the time the meeting adjourned, the atmosphere felt subtly different. The usual quick exit of parents seemed to slow down. More people lingered, and I noticed a few glancing my way, some with a newfound curiosity in their eyes. As I stood to leave, Miss Chin approached me directly. "Aisha, I really appreciated your perspective tonight," she said, her smile genuine this time. "My son loves art too, and you're right, we often get caught up in the big-ticket items without thinking about the core programs." She then did something unexpected. "The PTA is forming a subcommittee to review the budget proposals more thoroughly before the final vote," she offered. "Would you consider joining? Your insights would be invaluable." I was stunned. An invitation to join a committee? From one of the insiders? It was a moment I hadn't dared to imagine. It wasn't just an acknowledgement, it was an invitation to participate, to have a seat at the table. My initial hesitation quickly faded, replaced by a surge of quiet determination. "Yes," I replied, a confident smile spreading across my face. "I would be happy to join. Thank you for the opportunity." As I walked out of the auditorium, the subtle glances I received felt different now. They weren't dismissive. They were curious, perhaps even respectful. The invisible barrier that had always separated me from the other parents seemed to have thinned, if not entirely disappeared. The weight of feeling ignored had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose. My voice, once a whisper, had resonated. My perspective, once dismissed, was now being sought. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes, all it takes is one person to speak up to start a ripple effect of change. The invitation to join the PTA budget subcommittee was a turning point. It wasn't just about the budget anymore. It was about validating my presence and my perspective within the school community. The first subcommittee meeting was scheduled for the following week, and I prepared diligently. I reviewed the school's financial statements again, cross-referencing figures and identifying areas where funds could be reallocated more equitably. I researched successful art and music programs in other schools, looking for cost-effective ways to enhance them without breaking the bank. When I arrived at the meeting, the atmosphere was markedly different from the general PTA gathering. It was a smaller group, more intimate, and the parents present seemed genuinely open to discussion. Mr. Davies was there, along with Ms. Chun and a few other key PTA members. This time, Mr. Davies greeted me with a more genuine smile, even offering me a cup of coffee. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. The subtle shift in his demeanor indicated a new level of acknowledgement, a recognition that I was no longer just the parent in the back. During the discussion, I presented my findings, focusing on practical solutions. I suggested a tiered approach to technology upgrades, prioritizing essential learning tools over flashy new equipment, and reallocating the saved funds to bolster the arts program with new materials and guest artists. I also proposed a community art supply drive, leveraging local businesses and parents who could contribute, rather than relying solely on the school budget. This would foster community involvement and supplement resources, showing that support for the arts could come from various sources. My suggestions were met with thoughtful consideration, not immediate dismissal. Ms. Chun was particularly supportive, nodding along and even adding her own insights to strengthen my proposals. It felt like a true collaboration, a stark contrast to my previous experiences. Mr. Davies, surprisingly, listened intently. He asked clarifying questions, engaged with my ideas, and even admitted that some of my points about equitable resource distribution had not been fully considered by the main committee. It was a refreshing moment of humility. Word of my involvement and contributions began to spread subtly through the school. When I picked up Marcus, other parents would nod, offer small smiles, or even say a quick, "Good job at the meeting, Aisha." It was no longer just Miss Chun. One afternoon, a parent I barely knew, whose child was in kindergarten, approached me. "Aisha, I heard you're on the budget committee," she said. "I'm so glad someone is looking out for the arts. My daughter lives for her music class." Her words were a quiet validation. It wasn't a dramatic overnight transformation, but a gradual, organic shift in perceptions. I was no longer just the low-income Black parent. I was Aisha, a thoughtful, engaged parent with valuable insights, someone who could contribute meaningfully. I continued to attend the subcommittee meetings, contributing actively and advocating for balanced decisions. My focus remained on ensuring that every child, regardless of their family's income, had access to the best possible education and enrichment opportunities. The experience taught me that sometimes changing perceptions isn't about grand gestures, but about consistent, quiet presence and the courage to speak your truth. It's about showing up, even when you feel invisible, and letting your actions speak louder than any preconceived notions. The Budget Subcommittee eventually presented its revised recommendations to the full PTA, incorporating many of my suggestions. The final vote passed, ensuring that while technology would be upgraded, the art and music programs would also receive increased funding, protecting them from severe cuts. It was a significant victory, not just for me, but for the entire school community. My involvement didn't stop there. I was asked to join the school's new Community Engagement Committee, tasked with finding ways to involve a wider range of parents in school activities. It was a role I embraced wholeheartedly, seeing it as an opportunity to build bridges and foster true inclusivity. I helped organize a skills share event, where parents could volunteer to teach short workshops based on their talents, regardless of their profession or income. We had parents teaching everything from basic coding to knitting, from storytelling to gardening. It was a beautiful display of diverse talents. The art supply drive I proposed was a huge success, bringing in donations from local businesses and families, ensuring Mrs. Davis had plenty of materials for her classes. Marcus was thrilled, and his art projects continued to flourish, a testament to the power of collective effort. Through these initiatives, I met more parents, truly connecting with them beyond the superficial. I discovered that many shared similar concerns about equity and access, but perhaps hadn't felt empowered to voice them. My journey had, in a way, opened doors for others. The subtle glances I once received were replaced by warm smiles and genuine conversations. Parents would approach me in the schoolyard, asking for my opinion on various school matters or simply chatting about their day. I was no longer an outsider. I was a valued part of the community. This experience had a profound impact on me personally. It reinforced the importance of speaking up, even when it feels uncomfortable or intimidating. It taught me that my lived experiences, far from being a disadvantage, were a unique strength, offering perspectives that others might lack. I realized that true change often begins with challenging the status quo, with pushing back against unspoken biases, and with asserting your right to be heard. It's about recognizing your own worth, even when others fail to see it. My confidence blossomed, not just in school settings, but in all areas of my life. I started exploring opportunities to use my resourcefulness and organizational skills in new ways, perhaps even starting a small venture of my own someday. The possibilities felt endless. Marcus noticed the change too. He saw his mom, once quiet and reserved in school settings, now actively engaged, respected, and making a real difference. It taught him a powerful lesson about standing up for what's right and the impact one person can have. The low-income Black parent, label that once felt like a burden, began to fade. It was replaced by a sense of empowerment, a quiet pride in who I was and what I could achieve. My involvement at the school wasn't just about changing perceptions of me, it was about changing the perception of what a contributing parent truly looked like. This journey taught me that prejudice often stems from a lack of understanding, and that the most effective way to challenge it is through consistent presence, thoughtful contribution, and unwavering authenticity. My story became a testament to the power of showing up, speaking truth, and changing hearts, one conversation at a time. My life is still a juggle of part-time jobs, and financial security remains a goal. But now, I navigate the world with a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. The school, once a place where I felt invisible, has become a community where my voice is heard and my contributions are valued. And that, I've learned, is a net worth far greater than any financial statement could ever capture. It's the wealth of respect, connection, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I helped make a difference, not just for my son, but for every child who walks through those school doors.